Dr. Beverly Crusher is looking forward to working with her dear friend, Dr. Dalen Quace. Beverly calls Worf the big guy who never smiles, and Tau Alpha C is 123 days away at Warp 9. Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Next Generation Season 4. I almost said Season 5. Season 4, Episode 5, Remember Me, story by Ralph Phillips, written by Lee Sheldon, directed by Cliff Bole. This was October 20th, 1990. Where were you? What's up, Sirach? How are you today?
I'm good. I am good.
I have
How
a
about you?
correction. I'm okay, but we start off poorly. I have a correction. It was not story by Ralph Phillips. That was left over from last week. That's why I had a
Okay.
couple notes from last week still up. It still says Suddenly Human and story by Ralph Phillips. That's why I got the 4 and 5 mixed up. But anyway, written by Lee Sheldon, directed by Cliff Bole, October 20th, 1990. I'm doing great.
Okay.
Can I just be honest here? And everybody, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon for notifications. If you're listening in, give us a 5-star rating and a nice review. We'd really appreciate that, everybody. Make sure you are subscribed to our audio podcast and our YouTube channel. Sirach, I remember this episode. And I have thoughts on this episode. But I would love to hear yours.
Well, this episode gave me a great feeling of old school science fiction the way I remember it being. So this episode had the feel of a Twilight Zone episode, which is to me the gold standard of science fiction, storytelling, fantasy. It's just the best way to write something, the best way to present it to the audience and unfold the story. And for me, this meets that level of quality that I have seen in the past with Rod Serling and the Twilight Zone, because of the level of horror that was kind of eminent and kind of lingering, and the fear that it causes you if you were to place yourself in that same position, which you do normally, naturally, as an audience, viewing the episode. So it causes a certain level of anxiety just watching it, just trying to puzzle solve on it. Like, what would I do? Or who's right and who's wrong, and what is the solution? And sometimes the solution is like really easy to see in Star Trek, where it's like clearly just, these guys are trying to exterminate a whole village of people. That's not the right answer. But in this case, I was, I would have been wrong if I was the captain in this episode. I would have had I would have had Dr. Crusher confined to the room. I'd be like, Jesus.
He almost did. Actually, he kind of did. He did say, maybe you should confine yourself to sick bay.
Yeah, I would have been on that early, because already from the beginning I was thinking that. I was thinking, what the hell's wrong with her? She's seeing stuff that hasn't, that's not there, because in my mind, certain people's credibility is unimpeachable. So when Chief O'Brien says, I didn't see anything, I'm thinking this guy's, his word is his bond. So he's not lying.
Yep. Data. How is Data going to be wrong?
Data was like, no, that's not correct. And so it makes you question your own. Like, I had to, like, when numbers were being passed around, like how many people are on board the ship, I was thinking, how many people are on board a ship? Like, I had to go back in my memory of conversations of people saying there's about 1,000 people on board, the ship. But I forgot, and so I started to question that, because Picard was so sure that no, that's the number that we normally always have. So I don't understand, and Data too, and everybody else. So And then when people start disappearing, that's when I was like, oh, this is dope. This is a good episode.
Well, yeah, just when you're talking about Picard, uh, a lot of things popped in my head. My first thought was like Captain Mansplain for this episode. But everybody, this episode could have just been like mansplaining, like everybody going like, no, what are you talking about? Like, or gaslighting, you know.
Yeah,
Season 4,
yeah,
episode 5, the gaslighters, you know. When she says,
yeah.
when she says, Data, if there's only 100 people on the ship, what's with all the empty halls? Why is this so empty? And he's like, yeah, storage, rescuing people, but you could go on and on. And she's like, shut the uh, well, it's interesting because I really like this episode a lot. I think
Yeah.
it's one of my favorite episodes, and it's always been one of my favorite episodes. I think it's always been my favorite Beverly Crusher episode. Um, Not that there's a ton to choose from, but she does have some great moments and some good episodes also upcoming. But I really like this episode a lot. And when I was watching it, it wasn't any worse or better than I remember it. It was right on spot on, maybe slightly better. But I remember watching it going, oh man, I hope it's not too slow for Srock. I hope it's not too boring because I have the benefit of knowing that it was a good episode in hindsight, but I don't remember if it was a good episode as I'm going through it. You know, I'm like, oh shit. I hope Srock doesn't hate this episode. Man, that would suck. But I'm so happy to hear that you do like it. I think it's a great episode. I mean, obviously I can nitpick, there are a few things that, whatever you can fix
Yeah.
for everything
Yeah.
always. But in general, it just told a great story with a great twist, and it keeps you guessing, and it keeps you guessing in a good way. Sometimes they keep you guessing just to keep you guessing, like that show Lost back in the day. They would just drop in these mysteries here and there, and they wouldn't even they would only resolve like 1/3 of the mysteries they would give you. Whereas this one wasn't giving you a twist just to give you a twist. You're just following the story and you're following the path. And then finally you start going, aha, and it explains it. The whole thing was great. You don't even need the stuff with the traveler, but it was good to see him again. It could have just, we could have not even used him, but it was nice. It was another addition. It was just a good, solid story through line all the way through. The delivery was great. Everything just kept disappearing one by one. Um, Excellent episode to me. I was very happy with it.
100% agree with you. And I'm going to agree with the part that you didn't need the traveler. It's funny to me that a guy has the name the traveler, but you can locate him. How do you locate the traveler? He's always on the move. The fact that they're like, well, maybe he's at his house and yeah, we'll stop by that planet and go ring up the traveler up there,
Yeah.
go through the yellow pages.
Yeah, why don't they just have him on every mission then? If he's their phone a friend, just bring him
Exactly.
along.
Like, is he that easy to find? Like, I don't know. He jumps around he jumped on the starship at one point, right? We saw him before, right?
Mm-hmm.
What was the actor's name who played? Is that Eric Menyak?
Yep, exactly. Eric Menyuk. Yeah, that was our guy. We had him as a guest when Denise was here. Great guest, great guy. He does great work as a children's attorney, if I remember correctly. Really cool
Yeah.
guy. It was great to have him. And he's also a guest at Star Trek Las Vegas.
Yeah.
So that's always fun to see him there. But anyway, yeah. So it was nice to see the Traveler again. It's always cool to see him.
Cool to see him. Didn't necessarily need him to move the story forward. That they did try to make it a little, like he was the missing link to solving the puzzle. So that was, I guess the way they wanted to incorporate it. But I think it could have been solved just between Geordi and Wesley. Geordi like working back. What did you do? What happened here? What time? What was the exact moment? Da 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 da. And they could have reverse engineered, through that. But nonetheless, I thought Gates McFadden gave her best performance so far on the
Mm-hmm.
show in this episode. Ultimately, because she was given the opportunity to carry in an episode, so she could have probably displayed the same level of, just great performance in something else, but she doesn't get that much opportunity. She gets small moments, which she makes the most of, by the way. And it's just, you know, I have a whole new respect for her as an actor by watching the show, just because I can see how wonderful she is on this on Next Generation. And I didn't really know her from her performance; just knew her as as Gates. But now that I'm watching her as an actor, I was blown away. I gave her 4 stars in this episode for the performance myself. Just moments that I thought were great when she's sitting down with Patrick Stewart in that scene. What kind of, it might be the scene behind you,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's just before he disappears, and she's about to reveal something to him, like that she wants to say, that she's like, I may not get this opportunity to tell you something, but I want to tell you. And she's going to say, she says, Jean-Luc, you and I, and he disappears. But just that performance right there, the way she was holding back, like she was about to reveal a secret of hers, it felt like,
yeah.
and I think she just blew me away with her performance, because it's not easy to carry an episode. There's nobody to lean on. You're by yourself for a good part of this episode, and her and the computer and her solving the puzzle by herself, all was done great. So she blew me away.
The question is, Sirach, what was the secret she was about to tell her? What could it possibly have been? Who knows? Nobody could ever guess what that may have been, but
Yeah.
maybe we'll see the answer to that secret someday in the upcoming seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation. I'll give you a hint: coffee and croissants. That's her big secret, I think. Well, no, maybe that's Picard's secret. Never mind. I'm moving on. So the point is that I totally agree with you. And this is one of the things that made The Next Generation so good, especially in the later seasons, are these episodes about a certain character. It doesn't always have to be the Picard
Yeah.
show. Picard doesn't always have to save the day. Picard doesn't always have to have all the answers. Picard doesn't have to be the main character. Sometimes it could be Beverly. I mean, it could have been Geordi, could have been Worf. You could
Yeah.
really have made it anybody. And a lot of shows might have made it Picard since he's the main character. But it's cool that, I mean, obviously Beverly was the right choice because it was also Wesley was connected. But if Gates wasn't available that week or something, they could have, repurposed it into a Geordi episode, for example, or whatever, or a Worf. But it was really cool
Yeah.
just to see, you know, a Beverly Crusher episode that wasn't just a medical episode. Let them stretch their legs, let them, show off their acting chops, because otherwise she's just like, okay, well, all I'm ever going to get is medical episodes, and those are few and far between. But this was not. It had nothing to do with medicine, really. The only medicine that was relevant to this was just because she is the doctor, so she thought like a doctor. Let me, go into sick bay, let me do a scan on myself. But it's really fun to see weekly spotlights on a different character, and that's when we start to really love the characters. When you get a Geordi episode, when you get a Data episode, when you get a Riker episode, like not the
Mhm,
Troy
mhm.
episodes, but no, I'm just kidding. But that's good stuff. We didn't see a ton of that in the first 3 seasons as much, right?
No, and we like this. When another thing that makes this episode special, and it's funny because I would have thought that I would have heard about this episode, because people always talk about the great Next Generation episodes. Yesterday's Enterprise and these kinds of things come up title wise. I've heard another title, City on the Edge of Forever or something. Is
Mm-hmm.
it? So, like, these are the titles that have circulated, throughout the conversation of Next Generation. I haven't, I can't recall people saying to me, "Remember Me" as being one of the good episodes, and to me, this was up there. There's certain parts that could have gone better a little bit here and there, but it did start a little bit slow. But once it got going, I felt like we were in a bad dream that you just want to wake up from. But her being a doctor, using the scientific method, trying to, just figure out what is right, what's wrong, what she can find. I like when she's, for example, talking to the computer and she's like, I bet you don't know the answer to this one.
Yeah. She had a little bad. It's funny that she didn't look at the computer as a teammate, but an adversary. She's like, don't tell me
Yeah.
I'm crazy, computer. You work for me.
Yeah.
Like when she caught the computer, when she said, like, do I have like the skills required to carry out such a mission? And the computer says negative. She says, then why am I the only person on the ship? And they were just like, brr, brr, like does not compute. And she's like,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah. She gave the computer a meltdown. And
Yeah.
that was great because she loved doing that. And that showed to me that she kept her wits about her the whole time. Actually, I really think that Picard looked good in this episode too. Picard showed a lot of faith in when he shows faith in his crew members, it makes him look like a great leader. And that's a great leadership qualities when you're able to show confidence and faith in somebody that you trust and you say the right words that encourage them. And to me, that's the sign of leadership is being able to encourage somebody, bring the best out of them, and say the right things that motivate them. That's good leadership. And there was a moment there when Picard says, your word has always been good enough for me.
Yeah, that's the Picard we love finally coming out.
That,
That's not first
yeah.
season Picard. First season Picard would be like, not good enough, damn it, not good enough.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it was nice. Yes, no, you're totally right. A good leader is one that puts their hand on your shoulder and says, I got you, or I trust you, or you're the best we have. And he does that. Now, there was a tiny droplet of him just saying, well, I mean, I don't believe you and I think you're crazy, but I'm going to show you a bit of good faith and just so you know that I don't know. I feel like there was just the tiniest touch of like, I'm just saying this to be nice, but whatever it was, or maybe that's
Yeah.
just the way Patrick Stewart plays it because Patrick Stewart, for all of his acting excellence, he does. I feel like I wouldn't say he's lacking, but he's strange. He delivers things strangely when it comes to joyful things or sweet moments. You know, for example, if you need somebody to be authoritative and commanding and an ambassador or a diplomat or somebody that's fair, an arbiter, is amazing, great voice for it. But if the line is like, I loved you, or I love you, I've always loved you, it's going to be hard for him to deliver that and us go like, nah, come on, you don't love anybody. No, he'll be like, I love you.
Yeah.
There'll be something. It was just there's certain things that I don't know. Maybe if we saw it, I'm sure he would knock it out of the park. But
No,
you know what I mean?
he would say it the way he said it to Loaxana Troy in Menage a Trois. Remember that
Yeah, 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 yeah,
episode?
yeah,
At the end, he was like, "My love, how could you ever leave me?
yeah.
It's like it doesn't sound sincere in certain ways. There's certain tones in which it's not his best octave for emotional resonance.
And what's
Um, it,
interesting, sorry, just to finish up
yeah.
on that, I'm just thinking out loud here. But what's interesting is they started him off a lot rougher. And then they realized that Patrick Stewart is not that high up on the rough scale. So they softened him. Now, he's not down here all warm and fuzzy, but they softened him. And this is where he's landed. And it's a much better fit. And comparatively,
Mhm.
Avery Brooks, they started him off softer because the character was supposed to be young, bright-eyed, naive, a lot like how Bashir was. That's why Alexander Siddig was considered for the role. And sometimes that didn't fit with Avery. Like sometimes they would give him like silly or goofy things like a la Moraine or giggling on the beach. And that just didn't quite work with the gravitas that he held. So they roughed it up. They moved up to him. And so then
Mhm.
they adjusted for him, but in a different way. And then you had what we ended up with a few seasons later, which was magnificent, same as this. So it's just an interesting dichotomy of they kind of started off like that, but they both ended up finding a really good sweet spot for both captains. But sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, no, 100%. That's what I'm saying. It's about dialing in that tone, and that's why I said when he says those kinds of words about, I think he said something to Riker before about just don't worry, I've got your back. Something it was referred to in that way. I think there was some moment in which he lets Riker know, no matter what, I'm going to stand with you or something to that effect. But Picard says to her, "Your word has always been good enough for me." And I thought, oh, that's a great way for Picard to be emotional without being emotional. And so it was a good tone. And going back to um, Gates McFadden and her performance and tone that she took, there was a moment there when she goes to see Wesley and she says, "Wesley, I need you to try to do this and that." And he looks at her and she says to him, "You don't believe me."
Yeah, ouch.
Uh, and the way she said it was it was like, like a mom that's really been hurt. Like,
Et tu, Brute? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, it resonated with me emotionally and actually reminded me of the moment where Cisco is with Grandpa Cisco, and they're doing the test on him to see if he's a changeling, and he's like,
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
yeah, and he says to him, I need you to do the test," and Joseph Cisco's like, "What? Whoa, whoa, whoa. Wait a minute, you don't trust me? You don't believe me?" And it was kind of that kind of a moment, like, you don't believe me, you don't.
Mm.
There's a sensitivity there between a child and a parent when there's not an unconditional kind of trust there. And
God,
when that trust is broken.
I miss
Yeah.
Brock Peters so much. Just you talking about that scene got me emotional. I'm like, God, I miss that guy. When the way he would deliver things, like when he was scolding Cisco for that moment, it felt like he was scolding all of us a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like we're like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, Brock. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was
He's
like, I
just
didn't
doing what
believe
he
you
thinks.
either.
He's just doing what he thinks
Yeah.
is best.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
anyway,
Exactly.
we're so lucky
We
to
were
have had
all
him in
apologizing for that. And I
it.
was feeling that for Wesley because I was like, oh man, this is that moment as a kid, you're like, I don't think you're right. The kind of moment when you realize you don't think your parent is the greatest person of all time. You're like, wait a minute, this person could make mistakes, let's say, like they're
Bite your
fallible.
tongue.
And
Yeah.
I felt like that's Wesley was having that kind of a moment right there, like, Mom, I don't think you're right. Like, I don't know how to tell you this, but I think you're going crazy. And at some point, I thought she was going crazy.
Mhm. That's what we're
So,
led to believe at first. Yeah. I mean, we'll let you know what. Let's hit our break. Let's talk about this a bit more. But I think it's all in the delivery, and I think that's what did it so well. But we'll be right back on the seventh rule, everybody. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the seventh rule with Sirach, the game changer, Lofton. Here are the
yeah, hello.
trivioids. Dr. Crusher is looking forward to working with her dear friend, Dr. Dalen Quace. That was so rude, by the way, that we only saw him for like 3 minutes. He
Yeah.
was introduced. We think, anyway, we'll talk about that, but we think that we're being introduced to the character of the week, and that was it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Geordi scolds Wesley in engineering. Dr. Crusher interned with Dr. Dalen Quace on Delos 4. Dr. Hill and Dr. Solar go missing. Dr. Crusher wants the Enterprise to return to Starbase 133 for a full diagnostic. Wesley Crusher is working on a warp bubble experiment. Beverly Crusher calls Worf the big guy who never smiles. Tau Alpha C is 123 days away at warp 9.5, and 1014 is the exact number of crew there should be on the Enterprise. Man, I got a lot of typos in there. It was confusing. Okay, so where were we? I think that's what it was the delivery was that in the first few segments, it seems like this is a Beverly Crusher situation, which is emotional or alien, as in there's something affecting her mind, something affecting her emotions, something affecting her perceptions, an alien or an illness or something like that. That's what we're led to believe. And we're just, and it makes sense. It all fits. You know, we're seeing it. We're seeing that there's something going wrong. Everybody's looking around until we start hearing things that don't fit for us. And then but then we're totally lost. We're like, then I don't know what the heck is going on. But that's what sucks you in, because now you're like, tell me. I'm totally in. But yeah, so at first, right, you start to think, okay, Beverly Crusher's got some kind of illness or something affecting her mind, or, you know, whatever it is.
Well, because it starts off with one guy that we don't know, right?
That was
So
even
it's like,
better.
oh,
Right. It's
so it's like,
actually, yeah.
oh, it's a character. Yeah. So it makes you think, was that guy some type of alien that can, shapeshift or something to that effect? There's a thousand different things. Or did he just flee and leave? Did he commit suicide and jump out of an airlock? We don't really know what exactly happens to this one guy. So it makes it more, like a mystery. Like, okay, well, this new guy disappears. Nobody else remembers seeing him. That's where it becomes that extra Sherlock Holmes clue, right? Like, wait a minute, nobody remembers seeing this guy, but I remember seeing him as I was watching it.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking, okay, when I was watching it, was I watching a dream? Now I'm starting to question, what did I see? When I saw this doctor walking down the hallway with her, was I watching her having a dream? Did this guy really disappear? And is he trying not to be found? Is there, there's all kinds of things like that, especially when you talk about the backstory they gave him of Starbase 133 and whatever he was working on over there. That once you started to peel those layers back, which I thought they did a great job of peeling back with the dialogue, and Picard kind of investigating, will tell me, how long has he been working there? Well, he's been working 6 years. And once they found out that there was no record of him, now we know something else is going on, right? There's something more happening.
Right. And that's totally true. I completely agree. And I remember I made a few notes about that, about how smart it was that they started this episode. They started the subject matter as being him. There's a missing person. Okay. So first it's classic missing person episode. Uh-oh, what happened? Did he leave? Did he disappear? Yeah, like you said, shapeshifter. Was it not him? Was it an imposter? And then there's no record of him. So does that mean somebody's trying to disappear this guy? Somebody came in, killed him, kidnapped him, deleted the records, something like that. We've seen similar kind of things like on Deep Space Nine or whatever, where there's somebody that's just disappearing somebody. And so we start following that storyline, and it just keeps kind of going and going. And it's just so fun how the storyline just kind of keeps mutating and twisting, and we're trying to keep up with it. I thought it was brilliant. I thought maybe that was their best choice, was starting with that, because that keeps us busy for the first 15 minutes trying to think what happened to this one guy, and it turns out it's way bigger than that.
Yeah, and then the big moment is when Worf disappears. To me, that's when it's like, oh shit, this is going to cost us cast members, right? This is people, when the actual main cast, when the main crew is disappearing, we know we can't have that happen, because we need to be watching this show, and I can't watch the show without Data. So what's going on here? So that's when it becomes important for us. The stakes get raised. So I thought they did a great job of constantly raising the stakes, and it just kept raising and kept raising. First, it's just one guy we don't care about
Totally.
disappearing. Who cares? Then it's Dr. Hill and Dr. Solar, and that's a little nam for Dr. Solar. I think
You
you've
got
seen her
it.
before,
Yes,
right?
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. So
She's
what?
in
So
Black
then
Sun.
it's like I remember Dr. Solar, right? So now I'm thinking, wait a minute, I know Dr. Solar. This other guy I don't know, but
Yeah, I don't know
Solar I
Dr.
know.
Hill.
Right? I don't know
Hmm.
Dr. Hill, but I know Dr. Solar. So that's making me think, wait a minute, these are actual people that I know. This is not just like a bunch of people I don't know disappearing, right? Then it goes into warp. And then it's like, wait a second. And then nobody remembers Worf. So it's like, wait a second, none of you guys remember Worf? Now we know, okay, this is some kind of nightmare scenario. And I don't know, I got the poltergeist uh, chills when I saw that electric, whatever it was, the light that was coming from the door. It reminded me of poltergeist. You know,
Was that the
don't
one in the
step into the
TV?
light.
Was that the one with the
Yeah,
TV? Oh man, yes,
yes,
totally.
yes. So it gave me that kind of horror feel as well. Like what is going on? Is this an entity? Is this some kind of what is happening? What alien force? What is this? What's happening here?
Yeah. That kind of
Uh,
does remind me too
so
of like some of the old horror things too. There's also like The Fog. There was The Blob, if you remember The Blob, but like those old school things of just like this big messy thing that's coming to kill people and you don't know what the hell it is or what the hell's going on. That's funny. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what you said in the first segment. This felt like a Twilight Zone episode just in nature, the soul, the bones of it, which is just
mhm,
a weird, scary, unnerving mystery, right?
mhm, big time. And as soon as Dr. Quace disappeared, I thought to myself, maybe I'm going Quace.
Oh, this is my lucky
I had
day. I'm so glad that you saved
I
this for me.
had to
I'm so happy.
I had to
I,
use
I
that
only
one.
feel bad that you didn't save that for the free for all. Now none of them are going to get to hear this golden joke.
Oh, I've got
Um,
plenty more bad jokes where that
thank
came from.
goodness. Okay. Also, wanted to point out that was a very pretty exterior shot that must have been revamped for the HD stuff. You know, when they're leaving the star
Mhm.
base, that was really cool. Um,
Yeah,
it's cool to see Chief O'Brien. Always nice to see him. Uh,
I thought the same thing.
what
I was
about
so happy to see O'Brien.
what about when O'Brien was in sick bay? When she's like, oh, so O'Brien doesn't remember. I better check him. And he's like, what? I'm fine. You know, you should check yourself. And she's like, no, no, no,
Yeah,
I'm going to check you. And then
yeah.
there was something that happened where, oh, when she says, Dr. Hill, there's no Dr. Hill. Well, what about Dr. Solar? There's no Dr. Solar. And then she says, computer, locate Dr. Hill and Dr. Solar. And computer says they don't basically aren't on the ship. They don't exist. And O'Brien kind of goes, like like oh
Yeah,
see oh am I still the crazy one like it's so he did like a tiny little like
yeah, yeah. He's like, I'm just saying though, the computer agrees with
yeah
me.
we're
So
all crazy right
yeah,
except for you
yeah,
no, that was the case but anyway that was just a fun little it was subtle which is
yeah.
good because you know this isn't a comedy or whatever but it was there and that's our chief.
And no, the other thing is he was kind of rolling his sleeve down, and she's like, "Yeah, I can't find anything wrong with you." He's like, "I told you, you know." And then she's like, "Well, no, I'm going to run more tests." And I'm like, well, "What kind of what did you do? A colonoscopy?" Like, look, lady, I'm not going to remember what you're telling me. Like, there's no test.
She's
What
like,
the
I'm
hell
going to
kind of
keep
test is
testing you until you admit to lying to me. He's like, okay, I lied.
that?
Get your hands out of there. Jesus. Jesus.
Exactly. I was thinking that, like, what kind of tests are you going to try to run on this guy? He's like, just get me out of here. I want to go back to work.
Mhm.
But yeah, when Wesley disappeared, another kind of emotional moment to me because mother son kind of connection there. That was another big moment where they just kept upping the stakes in this episode. It kept being more and more on the line until it got down to just Picard and Dr. Crusher, where she's like trying to explain to him,
And he
on
just
a
looks so
one-on-one
funny the
tip.
way he's looking at her like, what? We're just, oh, hi.
Yeah,
It's just the two of us here as always.
yeah. And this gave me nightmare feelings because when you put yourself in Dr. Crusher's shoes, it's this is like a nightmare. This is something that that you would want to wake up from because it has this element, and this is a Twilight Zone element. They did an episode about a guy who loved to read books who was in a vault, and the world ended, and he crawled out of the vault and he realized he could read all the books he wants with nobody distracting him and doesn't have to work. And so he was essentially the last man on the planet. And as he's sitting on a mountain of books, excited to be alone and read to himself, he drops his glasses and accidentally steps on them, and now he can't
Ah,
see.
that is such a Twilight Zone. Don't tell me this. That's gonna haunt me now. Uh,
So that's why I said this is that feeling of like the walls are closing in on me, right? People are disappearing. I'm by myself now. When she was walking around the Enterprise, kind of opening doors, trying to find somebody, that was kind of a terrifying feeling to be on a ship by yourself, floating out. You know what I mean? You're not
mhm.
equipped to even, that it's not supposed to be like that. And so that idea kind of is a terrifying idea.
And not just this great concept, but as I mentioned, I really like how it was delivered. I felt like the writing, by and large, was very sophisticated. It
Mm-hmm.
really didn't try to dumb it down for us, and the writer, who I don't remember seeing before, so we'll have to look this person up. The name is Lee Sheldon. Sounds familiar. But what was sophisticated about it was that Lee did not dumb it down. Lee was like, how would this actually play out? For example, one of the best examples for this was towards the end when the ship starts rocking, when she's by herself, and she says, "Computer, what's happening?" And she says, the bulkheads are collapsing or something like that. And she says, "Why is this happening?" And the computer says, "A flaw in the ship's design." And that is so smart because if they're dumbing it down, for us or something, they'll say something like, the universe is shrinking, or the universe is too small for the ship, or something like that. But if you're just looking at it from the ship's point of view, they just think, hey, there's a flaw in the ship's design. The ship ends at the universe. Like it doesn't realize that the universe is shrinking. So it's just like this ship was built too big, or this ship doesn't fit in the universe. It's seeing it from that narrow point of view, that narrow perspective, and that's such a smart and open-minded way of delivering something, and really putting yourself in that perspective. And I thought little simple lines like that, I thought was really sophisticated writing. So kudos to Lee for that.
Yeah, and it made me also think in the line when she says to the computer, "I'm not talking to you." Right? She's like telling she said
Mm-hmm.
something, and the computer responded, and she's like, "I'm not talking to you. I'm thinking out loud," basically. I like that moment. It just because in a situation like that, what was believable to me is the only correspondence now that you would have is with the computer, and you would essentially treat that computer like a person, right?
Yeah.
Because that's all you're left with, right? Is this voice, and you're going to talk to it like you would talk to a person. And so I thought that was also like on the money for me as far as just a small touch, but it just made me feel the frustration she was having. It made me feel her wheels in motion as she was starting to figure out what's going on here and how she can get her way out of it. It was just a brilliant episode. Also showed like the mom son kind of telepathic powers that they have. But
Yeah,
again, Troy, you got all this telepathy.
I know. I know.
You can't figure out that she's telling the truth or
Yeah,
something
that's
like
one of those things at the beginning where I'm like, just ask Troy, just ask, not just as a counselor, but like she'll know if Chief O'Brien is lying. You don't have to give him a colonoscopy. You could just ask Troy. She's your cheat code. Use it. But
yeah.
I did look up Lee Sheldon. It is his only Star Trek episode. Surprisingly, when you have something this good, you would think they use Lee again, but Lee has written great shows like Eight is Enough. Whoa, Eight is Enough. Cagney and Lacey, Simon and Simon. But of course, episode shows that are more relevant to this one: The Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew Mysteries, for example. Today's FBI is another one. Quincy, M-E, like Quince. What was another one? Oh, lots of Agatha Christie episodes. So, but they're all like one episode at a time. But it's a lot of like mysteries and detectives and things like that. So this is definitely Lee's MO. Good stuff there.
Yeah.
We got a few minutes left, but there are a couple other things. We got a few non-appearance mentions. We got the cool Starbase exterior. I just think that overall, this is definitely one of my favorite episodes. And I feel like this is kind of one of those unheralded episodes, kind of like Explorers on Deep Space Nine, which is when you watch it, you're just like, you know what? It's not some huge fighting the Romulans or saving the day or giant explosions. It's just a simple story, but it's so perfect. It's like it's a good, well-defined and well-executed story. These are the ones that are the most memorable to me. So for me, it's maybe a top 15, maybe even a top 10 episode. It's a really good one overall.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a really good episode. Shout out to Cliff Bowl. You know, he got this one done. He kept, some of the shots he took, the choices he made with wider angles to make it look like she was more alone.
Yeah.
The kind of moving shot of her running down the corridors trying to find us, somebody else. I thought there were some good choices that he made. So he did his part as well. Um, yeah, this was an episode that I liked. Another thing too is Jack Crusher, man. Another nan for him in this
Yes,
episode. And
sir.
I'm thinking, I'm like, bro, this guy is like, who was it that was in DS9? Betty
Shakar.
Ryle? Shakar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was just remembering that. He was only in 3 episodes, but we think that he's in like 30 because they can't stop talking about the guy. He is on
Yeah.
the tip of everybody's tongues, man. They love him. And same thing with
Yeah.
Jack Crusher. He's mentioned every day.
Yeah. She still has a crush on Crusher.
Of
It's
course.
crazy. He never stopped. She never stops talking about him. So that was kind of a funny like moment for me. That little nap there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, another moment. The Traveler. I thought the Traveler delivered a nice little moment there. A line that was good for his delivery and that resonated with me was when he told Wesley, "As long as she thinks she's alive, she's alive."
Mm-hmm.
And that made me kind of go on a little philosophical tangent in my own head
Yeah.
about thinking you're alive, you know and putting thoughts into existence and those thoughts manifesting. So that kind of a tangent naturally kind of spurred for me when those lines came about. So kudos to Eric Menyuk for
Mm.
the delivery on that, just
That's our guy.
inspiring that thought. Yeah.
I think, therefore, I am. Now, what about the home run of the episode? Srock Lofton, who gets the home run of today's episode?
The home run is unquestionably for Gates McFadden. I gave her a 4-star performance in this one. A teary-eyed moment for me that when she gave a line was when when Jean-Luc disappeared at that final moment when she was about to reveal something intimate and secret, from her own personal life to him. When she was just about to say that and he disappears, she looks at that empty chair and she says, I won't forget. I won't forget any of you. And it was almost like a metaphor for the show itself and the characters of this show. It was almost like a microcosm of how we as the audience feel about the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
We won't forget. We won't forget any of it because we feel close to these characters. We feel attached to these experiences. And the world they built is something that we all can kind of play in our own ways. So when she said those lines, I thought they were poignant and they reflected the feeling overall of what it's like watching the next generation. It's an unforgettable experience.
That's what you are. Uh, I agree. Dr. Beverly Crusher gets the home run of the episode, but also Lee Sheldon. For somebody that only wrote one Star Trek episode, this dude gets it. Wow, how did he do that so well? And why didn't
Yeah.
the people at Star Trek say, hey, can you come back? Because Lee Sheldon, all of his credits is just like one episode in a million. Maybe he was just like tough to work with. And so they were like, this is a great episode, but I'm not dealing with that guy again. I don't know. But great episode. Big ups to him. Let's say thank you to our friends. And their names are Homer Frizzell, Dr. Anne-Marie Siegel, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackman, Tom TJ, Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Titus Muller, Dr. Mohammed Noor, Tierney C. Diekman, Anil O. Palat, Joe Balsarati, Mike Gu, and Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, My Live from Tokyo, The Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manisfee, Jed Thompson, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, who's back. Good to see her again. Glenn
Yay.
Iverson, Dave Gregory, Tim Baum, aka Grandpa One, Chris Sternett, our good pal, the Roddenberries, and of course, Jason Oken and Greg K. Wickstrom. All right, everybody, that's it for us. It's time for the free for all. It's going to get nuts, so stick around. We'll be right back on the seventh rule. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the seventh rule with Sirach frickin' Lofton. This is the free for all with Melissa Longo.
Hello, hello.
Jason M. Oken's got his Lion King poster. TJ Jackson Bay is out in Holodeck 11. Carrie Schwent has a warp bubble behind her. She's also in black and white for reasons unknown so far. The Dark Lord, Chris McGee's got an awesome seventh rule shirt. So does Carrie. Get yours at the link in the description box below. Faith Howell is on the bridge of the Enterprise D because she loves Wes Lee. And Allison Leach Hyde has her cool Uhura Trailblazer shirt that you could get at Walk in Art made by Melissa.com. All right, first things first. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
This episode was probably a 8.9.
Whoa. Does anybody else have any guesses that doesn't already know?
Well, without sort of getting my personal feelings about it, it probably is a 7-8. Not, again, I wouldn't rate it a 7-8, but I think that's probably where it ends up.
What would you rate it as?
I'd say, close to where Sirach is. I do like it a lot.
This guy gets it.
Yeah, same. I was going to say 7.7, so it's pretty close to what you think.
I'm going to go with 8.0, just because I think people really like The Traveler, but I think people won't like that it was a very doctor-heavy episode otherwise.
Very bodily kind of episode, too. Yeah. The answer is Jason M. Oken nailed it. 7.8.
Wow.
2 times in a row.
I know, this guy. But it is true. I
Nice.
think it's just because people like, they think of best of both worlds. They think of chain of command. They think of all good things. And, and then Remember Me, they're like, do I even remember that one? But anyway, what about non-appearance mentions? We get any non-appearance mentions?
Tons.
Yeah, sure did.
Feels like tons.
Here's the ones I got. You guys correct me if I'm wrong here. Sirach also correctly identified Dr. Solar, my favorite non-appearance mention. Jack Crusher, he's every week. We also had Dr. Kaczynski, right? And we had Luoxana Troy. But did we have any others? Those were the ones I got.
Those are the only 4 that I caught up to.
Okay. Then it's official. What about some kinds of or some sorts of? That's where it gets meaty.
I heard 2. First, Picard said, could your friend have returned to the starbase without telling you? An emergency of some sort.
Ooh.
Then later on, Wesley Crusher, when describing, coming up with a solution, says he said he was some kind of traveler. Talking about the Tau Alpha C.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Chris McGee. All right, Melissa Longo, will you please get us started off on the right track by telling us what you thought? Oh, that's Beverly Crusher getting sucked out of the thing behind you. Please let us know what you thought of this particular episode.
I enjoyed this episode quite a bit, actually. And I'm finding that Dr. Beverly Crusher is probably one of my favorite characters on the show. I think she's fabulous. I think Gates McFadden is fabulous, and I think she does a wonderful job with portraying Beverly Crusher. And her performances are always nuanced, and she's got such wonderful layers to her line reads and to her reactions, but it's always based on truth. I believe her when she tells me stuff or tells people stuff. So I enjoyed that. There was something else that I was going to say. Oh, yeah. Another reason, well, a mark of a good episode is if I talk to the television, as I've mentioned other times. And I don't know if this happened to other people while they were watching, but when she was like, "Where do I go, Wesley? Where do I go?" I don't know if anybody else did this, but I screamed, "Engineering, engineering, go to engineering." And so when she's going to engineering and running, I'm like, "Run, Beverly, run." So yes, I enjoyed this episode. There's 2 quotes that stood out to me. My favorite quotes were one from Picard, where he tells her, "Your word has always been good enough for me." I was like, oh, that's so wonderful. And then the other one was to the ship's computer when Beverly says, "I'm not talking to you." Yeah. So good episode. Yeah.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Melissa Longo, reminding us all to drop acid when we watch Next Generation episodes. Good stuff.
It's all natural.
Jason M. Oken is also here. What did you think of this particular episode?
Well, as I said earlier, I've always enjoyed it. I mean, to me, it's another example of how, a bottle show can actually be very exciting. You don't need a lot of explosions or anything else. I mean, it certainly was a money saver from many different respects, but it's exciting. You're on the edge of your seat. It's a sci-fi sort of techie story that Next Gen hasn't done in a while. It's sort of a mystery in a way, and it's probably it's certainly a unique type of episode. I mean, we talked a lot about certain themes kind of repeating again and again and seeing the same story again and again, but this is pretty unique in and of itself. And unless there are clues all over the place. If you watch it again, you can pick up the clues, and that means obviously they were thinking as they were doing this. You see, Crusher disappear from engineering, even though when Geordi walks by, she's not there. and then you have the reverse, and she's kind of walking down the hallway by herself. So it was very well done, and I said it before. I may not be the greatest fan of this director, but I think this is probably one of his better outings. I mean, there's an economy of scale, and and the way he places the camera, and to some degree, I think they didn't have to have a lot of coverage there, and most of the show, obviously, with Gates, who carries it tremendously. I think this is certainly, her first sort of true Crusher show. We're going to get a few more, although it ends with a whimper and Sub Rosa. It's probably one of the least favorite entries in the entire series. But the bottom line is, whenever she's given something to do, she's marvelous. And I think, people kind of woke up to this a little bit with the third season of Picard. But I think, this gives you a pretty good idea that she certainly has range and ability, and can captivate the attention, and you watch this wonderfully. Another thing that I notice here is, a lot of times we talk about the music sort of being front and center, and this is sort of the other way around. There's certainly score here, but it's really muted, and not a lot of it. There are quite a lot of scenes with no music at all, just the background ship sound, which is interesting. It's an interesting way of watching the show. It gives you a sort of different sort of perspective. I mean, overall, are there things to pick apart? And we'll talk about them later. I mean, perhaps this is not a show where you can think deeply, because a lot of it may not make any sense. But again, it's an exciting hour. It's certainly different and absolutely worth watching.
Wow, Jason loved it. Great stuff. Thank you very much, Jason M. Oken. TJ Jackson Bay is here, and we are so happy about that. What did you think of this episode?
I'm going to start off with one bit of trivia. Dr. Dalen Quace was staying in room 837 on deck 8. And that's all I got. No, I'm just kidding. No, this is also one of my favorite episodes to always revisit. It's got a lot of classic scenes in it, like Beverly hanging on the chair. Like, it's iconic. Beverly scene there. And I thought that Gates, like Jason said, really carried this episode. Makes it lovable, makes it rewatchable because of her performance, and watching her just kind of figure out this mystery. And one of the things I appreciated about the way they told the story is they didn't let us in on what's really happening until later on. Like, we don't know from the get-go that she's the one that's in the bubble. We just know that stuff is happening, and we're kind of wondering, like she is, what the puzzle is. Now, there's a lot of metaphysics in this episode too, so it got me really excited. I'm gonna try to keep it a little bit contained, but I love when they visit this subject of how important thoughts are, and what we create in the world. And it doesn't have to be in a warp bubble is the fun part of that. Like, our thoughts matter, and they do interact with time and space and other people. So, it's super exciting. I appreciate, really, I don't know if it was written this way on purpose, but the way they frame things, like, it made no sense for them to go back to the starbase, because if just astrophysics tells us that, that stuff isn't in the same actual location in the universe anyway. Everything's always moving. Mm-hmm. But I think that really has to do with how they're thinking. Wesley, I think the Traveler probably told him to go back there because it probably made Wesley feel like he believed he could do what he needed to do. And so, it's not just, Beverly's thoughts that are, creating, what's happening. Wesley is part of it too. And so I appreciate the way they frame the story. I appreciate, the way that, on both sides of that equation, thoughts, really mattered. So, well, that's all I got until later.
Nice. Excellent work. Thank you very much, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri. All right, Carrie Schwent is here. She's back in the 60s, and I bet she'll tell us why. What do you think of this one?
I love this episode. It's tied for my favorite Beverly Crusher episode. The other one we have not seen yet. Ooh. I'll say which one it is when we get to it. Although if you know me, you probably have a pretty good idea which one it is. And it's probably because the recent cable channel my husband and I found had a major Twilight Zone marathon over 4th of July weekend. This episode really feels like a Twilight Zone episode, hence the whole black and white theme, because I dress for a theme whenever possible. And an interesting fun fact I found out when looking at the actor that played Quace, who incidentally has 254 IMDb credits in his 96 years of life. I mean, the man did so much. But he was in 4 episodes of the Twilight Zone, which I thought was very, very cool. And Gates definitely puts on her own acting masterclass in this episode, because so many of the she's got so many scenes where she's either by herself or she's talking to someone and nobody believes her, but she sticks to her guns and knows what is right. And she did all of her own stunts in the episode, which I thought was very cool. I love how they did the one behind Melissa. They hung the hair on a wall and then pointed a bunch of fans at her. Wow. And it looks so cool. And apparently, a couple days after she finished her stunts for the episode, she found out she was pregnant. And and if my information is accurate, Brent Spiner is the godfather of that child, which I thought was just super adorable. This episode absolutely deserved its own episode, because it was originally supposed to be shoehorned into the family episode, which was a terrible idea. I'm glad they abandoned it. That's how we ended up getting the Traveler, because they decided to give this story its own full episode, so they compressed it onto the first couple of acts and then added Wesley and them, an engineer trying to figure it out, and the Traveler showing up. I love that we got to see him. I find that actor's voice incredibly soothing. I think he is very, very cool. The footage of the starbase at the beginning of the episode was reused from the Binars episode. So that's another way of fun saving money there. And before I get to my limerick, a tiny nitpick. Picard rushes over and helps Beverly when she escapes from the bubbling engineering, but nobody comes over to help Wesley stand up. I mean, all that faith and took a toll on him. He's so slumped over. He's going to stand himself up. I mean, justice for Wesley. Come on, help him stand up. But I have never written a limerick for an episode so fast in my life, and I had it written in my head the episode was like 2/3 over, and I pretty much had the whole thing already written. And it's sort of Beverly's mind as she's sort of puzzling out the situation. What's going on? Am I losing my mind? I doubt everyone would just run and hide. There's no one who believes me, but I can't take it easy. Hopefully Wesley can fix things in time.
Excellent work. Thank you very much, Carrie Schwent, a.k.a. Crafty Barris Rock. We forgot to mention that. I thought the same thing. If Beverly Crusher is appearing and she's saved and she hugs Picard, she sees her son that she's collapsed hanging, and she's just like, whatever. And then she just goes over to like the Traveler, like totally ignores that. Like, wouldn't she, the first thing she does, wouldn't it be to run over to Wesley and be like, oh my God, Wes. Anyway, whatever. I agree.
Stop being so dramatic, Wesley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Drink some Gatorade. You'll be fine.
Chris McGee loves Gatorade. His favorite is the cucumber lime.
Quite possibly. I'll leave the audience to guess, though. So,
what do you think of this one?
This has always been a favorite episode of mine. Bottomless episodes usually are, or often are anyway. I love a good old-fashioned mystery, so I enjoy the slow unfolding of the mystery, which keeps the audience guessing for half the episode. And it's wonderful that we get a somewhat surprise visit from the Traveler again after 3 seasons, played wonderfully by Eric Minyuk. Of course, as Jason remarked, the relatively subtle music perfectly accompanies the episode. I'll one observation I had was that I half expected Troy to disappear when Dr. Crusher turned her head away in the hallway, leaned against the bulkhead, but she's still there. And then, of course, as Crusher runs off to find her son, get a close up of Troy's expression, and it almost makes you, and it's kind of a misdirection. It makes the audience believe that maybe Wesley has disappeared too, judging by Troy's expression. But he's still there, at least for another minute or two. One last thing I want to mention before the memorable quote, and I'll save all my nitpicks for things I've done said, is Dr. Quase's observation about not appreciating the people in your life while you still can, I think is probably one of the most important life lessons that every one of us should take to heart. With that in mind, I'll just take a quick moment to thank all of you. And I deeply appreciate that we are given the opportunity to spend a couple hours each week discussing our favorite television shows with you.
Chris McGee, not so dark Lord, please continue.
I like to put on a good mask, And the memorable quote, something that I often say to myself is, if there's nothing wrong with me, maybe there's something wrong with the universe.
Also words to live by, I think, sometimes. Great stuff. Thank you very much, Chris McGee, the Lord of Light. Faith Howell is here at the helm. What do you think of this one?
I went into it not remembering it very clearly, apparently, but I really, really enjoyed it. I agree with TJ. I think, and let me back up. I think I disagree a little bit with Jason, just in that I think the lighter message here gave us sort of a multifaceted episode where you can take what you want out of it. So I love what TJ said about words matter. I love what Chris just gave us. And the message I took from it is how important it is for us not only to remember those who are gone, but to have other people who remember them as well. That it was very distressing to Crusher that not only were they not there, but that other people didn't remember that they weren't there and that they had just disappeared from existence. So I think that's the takeaway for me for this episode is that, we share some collective consciousness, and that's important in grounding and the appreciation of life.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Faith Howell, on the helm of the Enterprise D. I should say at the helm. Allison Leach Hyde is here, a trailblazer in her own right. What do you think of this one?
I love this episode. I've always loved this episode, so I've been excited. I'm like, it's coming up. Yay! We all get to watch this one because Gates is fabulous in this episode. Her acting, her physical acting, I've said it before, is top notch. She is an amazing physical actress, not just stunts. Like when she's dismissing the computer walking down the hall, I love that. She's like, like she's fabulous. And she got to actually show us her character. She was 40% of this episode? It's insane. She hasn't gotten that much of just her and her face, which is gorgeous, taking up all the space, seeing all the nuances going across her face. And I thought she carried this episode beautifully. I do love that we had minimalist music, but it was used really well for really key ideas to come across. I find it interesting that Rick Berman thought that this might have been a too high concept episode for the audience. He didn't really like that we were like tricking people in the beginning. I thought that's interesting. That's what I really liked about this episode. I didn't think it was a trick. I just thought we were experiencing Beverly's universe because we were. And then we, of course, find out after the second time they tried to bridge that gap that no, actually there's two and they're not together and we're trying to bring them together. And I really like the idea of this is how she sees all of her crewmates. Like she created them in her mind. And so seeing that she that she feels that she has that much of a regard from her crewmates is really quite wonderful. Like, Picard saying, your word is good. That's all I need. I'm with you. I'm going to help you figure that out. Like, so she feels that from her captain and her friend she's known for ages. And I also thought it was interesting that that's kind of how it went. Like, people who hadn't been with her for as long disappeared first. And we ended with Picard because he's been in her life the longest. That's just how I took it. And also because then she could say, you really think the two of us are taking the ship around the universe to figure it out? Like, no, that's not okay. That's not logically sound. So there's a lot of little things you can take from this, but the big thing I take from this is that we needed more Gates McFadden all the time in Star Trek. So happy with Picard season 3.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Allison Leach Hyde, out in New Mexico. All right. Jake's final take, everybody. Sirach, any final thoughts on today's episode?
Yeah, I heard a door chime in this episode when Dr. Crusher was ringing the bell for Quasey's room, and the door chime. It's just a small sound, but it made me think how much detail goes into little things of them having to create that sound just for the Star Trek door chime. So just a small sound effect, but it sometimes it deserves some notice. I like when the computer said the primary mission, out loud when Dr. Crusher asked, computer, what's our primary mission? And the computer responded to explore the galaxy. I thought that was just a reminder of what we're here watching this show for, kind of to explore the galaxy. So I like that moment there. And I can feel for Wesley because I've created a warp bubble several times in the bathtub when I was younger.
It's a warm bubble, not a warm bubble.
Oh, sorry. My bad. I guess.
That's amazing.
Yeah, those things could be deadly. They could be deadly.
Especially if there's residue.
Yeah, you got to be careful. But yeah, I did have a kind of a thing where I felt like some of the logic could be explained when the crew was disappearing. The way Data was like, no, we have extra room for hostages or for whatever we pick up and stuff like that. But at the end, when it's just Beverly and Picard, I would think that Picard would think that that's unusual. That there's a bunch of empty seats here. Like, what am I doing sitting here by myself on this? It should become weird to him at that point. I understand that the people that he knows are gone, but it should be weird because I guess you would know that your training is for leading a crew of men, and there's nobody to lead in this particular moment. So I would think that would resonate with him. But that's my own little kind of silly logic, though. And the last thing I wanted to mention was I enjoy the logs in the beginning. They have the captain's log, and this one started with Dr. Crusher doing the doctor's log. And so right away it was like, oh, something different, something new, that I don't recall happening before. Maybe it did, but it just didn't resonate with my memory. I couldn't remember there being an open on an episode where the doctor's log is beginning the tone of the episode. So I was happy to hear that too, as far as just being a change of pace and something new and unusual. And then the rest I'll leave for things that are left unsaid.
Great stuff. What a fun episode. I'm so glad everybody enjoyed it. It's one of my favorites, actually. And it doesn't feel like a favorite kind of episode. So it's really cool that other people realize that it's just a really well written and well delivered episode. Good stuff. Thank you very much to Allison Leach Hyde, Faith Howell, Chris McGee, Carrie Schwent, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Jason M. Oken, Melissa Longo, for myself, for Sirach Lofton, for Melissa and Aaron Eisenberg. We'd like to thank you all for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next time. Until then, always remember the seventh rule.